used around the area in the world, and the aim of this show is to increase participation and awareness of sport, but also we have a lot of guests from a lot of different areas, psychology and other related fields too, give us an insight into their research. They've got some really fascinating researchers, really in tune with the summertime. We had heat wave, and no doubt we'll have many more over the next few months. We'll talk about sun protection, definitely a big thing in sort of sport, particularly playing like outdoor sports like cricket. And other things as well. So a bit more of an insight in terms of research around our sort of habits around the area. Today we have dermatologist Dr. HIVA FASSIHI, who's welcome to the show. Great to have you on board.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
So if you give us a bit of insight into the research, I suppose it kind of bodes in the sense that in the UK, Brits don't generally sort of like I wouldn't say they don't take wearing sunscreen, seriously, but it doesn't seem to be, and I can speak about this subjectively too. It doesn't seem to be as sort of like insistent that how important it is to wear sunscreen. Is that a case in that? Do you think?
I think that's true, and this research done by La Roche-Posay has shown that most Brits don't wear sun cream on a daily basis. Sometimes they don't even wear it on sunny days, but only about a third of them would put it on a sunny day. So I think this idea that we're safe in the UK, but when you go on your sunny holidays abroad, that's when you should protect, is definitely out there. And I'm here to just sort of say that that's not true. You can do quite a lot of damage to your skin even in the UK sunshine, which this week has been glorious.
Absolutely, no, that's for sure. And in terms of, say, what's the sort of recommendation? Sort of what sort of can we do, Doctor? What does the research tell us? What are your top sun care and skin protection tips?
Yeah, the easiest thing to say is that, why is it that we say put your sun cream on every day? And even more so on sunny days, is because there's a huge amount of research that tells us that ultraviolet radiation from the sun is there on sunny days, but it's there on cloudy days. It's actually there in the winter months as well, and there's good evidence to show that does damage our skin. And in the sort of short term, it might cause sunburn, which is painful, but in the long term, if you have chronic exposure to ultraviolet radiation, you will increase your risk of skin cancer. And we know that skin cancer is one of the leading cancers in the world, and also 2,000 people still die of melanoma each year, and that's a completely avoidable condition in about 80% of the cases. So you're trying to prevent skin cancer in older life, but actually possibly more relevant to some people is that actually ultraviolet exposure causes a lot of premature aging of the skin as well. And I've had lots of patients who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s who said, I wish I'd known, I wish I'd protected more because of the aging process that is actually quite hard to reverse. So you're really doing it from a skin cancer point of view, and you're doing it from a premature skin aging point of view as well.
Absolutely, and I suppose with skin cancer, it's one of them that could, at least my perception is, it's sort of not always easy to detect type thing. I suppose it's sort of not an easy thing to sort of like to sort of detect, so to speak. But in terms of how can we change seasonal perception towards sun care? I mean, like I mentioned before, growing up for me, I grew up in Australia. It was like it's a big topical thing. It's consistently sort of like drilled into you in school, in the media, about how important it is to sort of wear a hat and sunscreen. But you don't seem to have that here. And the sun this week for me has been as strong as it. It really is quite strong. It's like you go out there, it won't take long to burn. How do you think it would sort of change perceptions? Do you think, Doctor?
Yeah, and we have a lot to learn from the Australians who had this amazing campaign 10, 15 years ago with the slip, slap, slop. And,
that's right.
Protection in children, and actually, if you have children who protect, they'll grow up to be adults who hopefully understand and protect, and it just becomes the norm. Here, I think the bright sunny days are so few that people, when it comes out, think, I'll just go out and enjoy it, and they sort of forget about the sort of potential long-term problems. But my tip always to my patients is just sort of use it every day. Use it every day on your exposed areas, and then it depends on what you're doing that day. If it's going to be a bright sunny day that you're in the park, then you want to be reapplying it. If it's in the middle of winter and you're going into the office, well then once a day is enough. But if you do it every day, you're never going to be caught out. You're never going to have that changeable weather where suddenly the sun comes out and you're not protecting. And I think if we manage just to convince people to do that, then that would be great. But a lot of people sort of say, I don't like wearing sun cream, it's too greasy, it's too thick. But I don't believe that anymore. The formulations are amazing. There's so much choice. So there's definitely something out there for every skin type, for every person. It's just finding the right one for you.
Yeah, and so that's really interesting. You mentioned the right thing, for yourself, and I suppose everybody's got their own kind of, I suppose, I think that's the sort of key, really, and that's what I've done myself. I've found the right one that works for me. But equally in saying that, I don't mind having some exposure, maybe a little bit, but certainly there's certain parts, I suppose, like shoulders and other areas that sort of probably more vulnerable. I definitely like from the off put it on. But do you think that's an important thing, for people to sort of understand and sort of be aware that even when it doesn't look like you're out there, and sometimes you kind of don't notice the heat, but before you know it, you can burn or you can feel uncomfortable as well. So, do you think it's important to get into maybe a routine and sort of, stick to that routine?
I think so, because I think even, on cloudy days, like you say, ultraviolet, which is divided into ultraviolet B and ultraviolet A. Ultraviolet A, this longer wavelength, actually comes through on cloudy days. It comes through the windows. It even goes through thin clothes. So for that reason, people do get caught out. They sort of think it's safe because it's cloudy, but it's not. Some sunscreens are not the total answer. You need to combine it with sensible behavior. You don't want to sit outside right in the middle of the day when it's really bright. You want to make sure you cover up, like you were saying, either wearing your rash vest or your UV protective tops, or even a t-shirt, wearing a hat, wearing sunglasses. These are all really important measures. So not to rely solely on your sun cream, but if you've got it on in the morning, then that's a bonus. It's going to protect those exposed areas, particularly the face.
Absolutely. And in terms of, say, like younger audience, I suppose any audience, but maybe people who prioritise tanning over like the UV rays. I mean, I suppose, most people like a tan, so to speak, and they'll go out there and they might sort of like, prioritise getting a tan. And what would you say to people who sort of like have that perception of just, I'll take my chance and I'll prioritise my tan over the UV rays?
Yeah, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking their chance. But, this study from La Roche-Posay, it shocks me to hear that 10% of 16 to 24-year-olds still use a sunbed a couple of times a week. I mean, that figure is actually quite shocking because it suggests that people are prioritising a tan over anything else. And it's really trying to put it out there. There are so many ways now of faking a tan. There are all these creams and lotions, potions and sprays. So why not fake it? You can fake it really effectively. You can still go outside and enjoy and be sporty and outdoorsy, but just do it in a really safe and sensible way, and definitely not to use the sunbeds, because you have no idea how much you're getting, what types of ultraviolet you're getting. So I would certainly say never use a sunbed and just be very careful. And then faking it, using the creams to self-tan, that's another way of doing it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose the other thing as well too, I know sort of, I mean, there is a case for like, for getting some sun exposure in the skin. I don't know. I don't have any sort of research to back it up, but I suppose maybe I don't know if it's anecdotal, but I have sort of heard there is some sort of But what would you sort of say to that, Doctor? That sort of people thinking, well, I think there is some benefit to get some sun exposure on the skin.
Yeah, the one that I've heard most is vitamin D. So if you're not going in the sun, or if you're protecting hugely from the sun, you're going to drop your vitamin D levels. And really, and there have been studies that, they followed holiday makers on holiday, they've worn sunscreen, they've not burnt, and actually they have increased their vitamin D levels. So my answer is that, during the summer months, as long as you're outdoors but you're being safe, you will still increase your vitamin D levels. And if you're a little bit low for whatever reason, it's so easy to supplement vitamin D these days. You just buy it over the counter and take it over the winter months just to top up. And that's compared to getting melanoma and potentially, dying from your melanoma. The balance to me just isn't there. So certainly it's something people talk about, but again, I don't think it's a great excuse. And it's partly because, the way we wear sun cream, we never quite block ultraviolet 100%. So even if you're wearing sun cream and you go out, you're still getting lots of UVB, which is the type of radiation that triggers vitamin D synthesis initially in the skin. You're still getting quite a lot of UVB onto your skin, and if you've exposed your forearms, that in the studies that's been shown to be good enough to generate enough vitamin D. So go out there, be safe, be active. These are really important factors, but do it safely. Don't burn. Don't spend too long out there without protection, because then you're going to harm your skin and increase your risk of aging and skin cancer.
Absolutely. And I suppose one final thing that sort of comes to mind. I was actually thinking about this the other day. It might be sort of outside the scope of the interview, but what about in terms of sort of checking for melanoma? I mean, one thing that's sort of I don't really see happening here too much is sort of people in terms of maybe sort of checking to see if they have got check the skin basically to see if there is anything. Is that something that sort of, what are your thoughts on that, Doctor, in terms of just sort of check and see if there are any dark spots that have changed or sort of discoloured?
Yeah, I think one is that if you're worried about anything, do not hesitate. Go and see your GP, go and see your dermatologist, get it checked out. It's not worth waiting. And then actually educating the public about what kind of things to look out for on their skin. Pigmented lesions that are getting bigger or bumpier, or the colour changes, all those are obviously alarms that mean that you should go and get it checked out. But there are a group of individuals, maybe those who've got more moles or who've had more sun exposure, who do go and see their dermatologist sort of regularly for skin checks. And of course now quite a lot of particularly the private units do mole mapping, so you can map everyone's moles, and then if you're seeing them annually, you can see any that are changing that may be worrying, and actually you can deal with it early, because the two things about skin cancers are, they say about 86% of them are preventable because they're UV triggered, and actually pretty much all of them will be curable if you catch them early. So the idea is that they're caught early and treated, and hopefully that way you're cured of your skin cancer.
Absolutely.
But certainly if you're worried, I'd say, go and see your local dermatologist, get your skin checked, and if there's any concerns, the dermatologist will tell you that maybe you need to go back every year, or there may be a couple of moles we need to keep an eye on, and then they can deal with that for you.
Absolutely, that's really sort of great input there. I really want to thank you for your time, Dr. HIVA. It's been really interesting speaking to you, and thanks for joining us on the show.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.